Marcus had been in IT for 15 years and considered himself a technology expert. He criticized the new CEO Alex's technical ignorance at every opportunity. But when Alex asked questions about technology, Marcus tried to lecture him. He had no idea that Alex's real identity in the computer world overshadowed Marcus's entire career. The glass towers of downtown Seattle gleamed in the morning sun as employees of Meridian Solutions streamed into the 32nd floor offices of one of the city's most promising mid-sized tech companies. It was a Tuesday in late September, the kind of crisp autumn day that made the Pacific Northwest feel like the center of the technological universe. Marcus Webb adjusted his vintage Star Wars t-shirt and settled into his ergonomic chair in the IT department, surrounded by the familiar comfort of multiple monitors, tangled cables, and the quiet hum of servers that had been his professional home for the better part of 2 decades. At 38, Marcus had seen the tech industry evolve from the early days of dial-up internet to the current era of cloud computing and artificial intelligence. He took pride in being what he called a tech purist, someone who understood systems from the ground up, who could troubleshoot problems that left younger IT professionals scratching their heads, and who remembered when programming required real skill rather than just copying code from online forums. Marcus had joined Meridian Solutions 4 years earlier, drawn by the company's reputation for innovative software development and its promise to disrupt the customer relationship management industry. He had worked his way up from junior systems administrator to senior IT manager, earning the respect of his colleagues and the grudging acknowledgement of upper management that he was indispensable to the company's technical operations. But 3 months ago, everything had changed with the arrival of Alex Chen as the new CEO. The previous CEO, Robert Hartwell, had been a classic tech executive, someone who had grown up with computers, understood programming languages, and could discuss technical architecture with the kind of fluency that earned Marcus's respect. Hartwell might not have been able to configure a server himself, but he understood what Marcus and his team did, and he valued their expertise. Alex Chen was different, completely different. At 42 years old, Alex appeared to be exactly what Marcus despised most in modern corporate leadership: a smooth-talking, MBA-wielding executive who had probably never written a line of code in his life. Alex dressed in expensive suits rather than the casual attire that was standard in tech companies. He spoke in management buzzwords rather than technical specifics. And worst of all, from Marcus's perspective, he seemed to approach technology as a business tool rather than the elegant, complex craft that Marcus knew it to be. From the moment Alex had introduced himself to the company in a polished presentation heavy on market strategy and light on technical vision, Marcus had pegged him as another corporate climber who would probably run the company into the ground while enriching himself through stock options and golden parachutes. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody at Meridian Solutions knew, was that Alex Chen was one of the most accomplished technologists of his generation, a programmer whose innovations had shaped the very foundations of modern computing, and a billionaire entrepreneur who had built and sold multiple groundbreaking technology companies under different identities. Alex's real name was Alexander Chen-Williams, though he had used various professional names throughout his career to maintain privacy and avoid the kind of celebrity that often attached itself to successful tech entrepreneurs. 25 years earlier, as a graduate student at MIT, he had developed a revolutionary data compression algorithm that became the foundation for modern file-sharing systems. He had licensed that technology to a major software company for what seemed like a fortune at the time, $50 million, but had retained certain rights that eventually proved to be worth billions as the internet exploded in popularity. Over the following decades, Alex had founded, built, and quietly sold 7 different technology companies, each one focusing on a different aspect of computing innovation. He had developed early social networking platforms before Facebook existed, created cloud storage systems before anyone called it the cloud, and pioneered artificial intelligence applications that were now considered industry standards. But Alex had grown tired of the public attention that came with visible success in the tech industry. He was exhausted by the constant pressure to be a visionary, to make bold predictions about the future of technology, and to maintain the kind of public persona that investors and media outlets expected from tech leaders. So he had made a decision that puzzled his business advisors and confused his few close friends. He would go undercover, using a combination of shell companies, investment vehicles, and legal structures that obscured his ownership. Alex had purchased a controlling interest in Meridian Solutions. Then, using credentials and references that were technically accurate but strategically incomplete, he had applied for and accepted the position of CEO under a simplified version of his name. His goal wasn't to make money. He already had more wealth than he could spend in several lifetimes. His goal was to understand what had happened to the technology industry he had helped create, to see how companies actually operated when they thought no one important was watching, and to determine whether it was possible to build the kind of innovative, ethical tech company that had originally inspired him to become an entrepreneur. Working at Meridian Solutions under his assumed identity, Alex was conducting an experiment in corporate anthropology, observing how employees, managers, and systems functioned when they believed they were dealing with an ordinary CEO rather than a technology legend. And Marcus Webb was about to become an unwitting test subject in that experiment. The Tuesday morning that would change both of their lives started like any other. Marcus arrived at his desk at 7:30 a.m., a full hour before most of his colleagues, and began his daily routine of checking system logs, reviewing overnight backup reports, and monitoring network performance metrics. He took pride in maintaining what he considered to be a flawless IT infrastructure, and any anomaly or inefficiency was a personal affront that demanded immediate attention. Around 9:15 a.m., his concentration was interrupted by a knock on the door of his office. He looked up to see Alex Chen standing in the doorway, holding a tablet and wearing the kind of uncertain expression that Marcus had come to associate with non-technical executives who were about to waste his time with stupid questions. "Good morning, Marcus," Alex said politely. "Do you have a few minutes to discuss something?" Marcus suppressed a sigh. These conversations with Alex had become a frustrating routine over the past 3 months. The CEO would appear in the IT department with questions that demonstrated what Marcus considered to be a shocking lack of understanding about the systems that powered their company. "Sure," Marcus said, not bothering to hide his reluctance. "What's the technical crisis today?" Alex stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. "I've been reviewing our cloud infrastructure costs, and I'm wondering if we might be able to optimize our server allocation. I'm seeing some patterns in our usage data that don't quite make sense to me." Marcus's jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of superficial analysis that he expected from someone who approached technology as a spreadsheet rather than understanding the complexity of what was actually happening beneath the surface. "Alex," Marcus said, his tone taking on the patient condescension he usually reserved for users who couldn't figure out how to reset their passwords. "Cloud infrastructure isn't something you can just optimize by looking at usage data. There are dozens of variables involved: load balancing, redundancy protocols, regional latency considerations, failover systems." He gestured toward his multiple monitors, which displayed real-time system performance data that he doubted Alex could even interpret. "This stuff is complicated. It's not something you can understand by reading management reports." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right that it's complicated. But I'm curious about something specific." He showed Marcus the tablet, which displayed a detailed analysis of their server architecture. "It looks like we're running redundant database clusters in 3 different AWS regions, but our actual user base is concentrated in 2 specific geographic areas. Wouldn't we get better performance and lower costs by consolidating to 2 regions and implementing a more sophisticated caching layer?" Marcus glanced at the analysis, and despite himself, he was impressed by the level of detail. This wasn't the kind of surface-level observation he expected from Alex, but his irritation overrode his surprise. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets companies in trouble," Marcus said dismissively. "You're looking at this like it's a simple cost-cutting exercise, but you're not considering the technical implications. Database replication across regions isn't just about geography. It's about latency, consistency, failover protocols." He stood up and moved to a whiteboard covered with network diagrams. "Look, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen what happens when executives try to make technical decisions based on financial models rather than understanding how these systems actually work. Alex listened carefully, asking occasional questions that Marcus interpreted as confirmation of his technical ignorance. So you're saying that geographic distribution isn't the primary factor in determining optimal server placement? Exactly, Marcus said, warming to his subject. It's about network topology, peering agreements, CDN integration. You can't just look at where your users are and assume that's where your servers should be. That makes sense, Alex said. What about our database architecture? I noticed we're using a traditional relational structure for user data that seems like it might not scale efficiently as we grow. Marcus's eyes narrowed. This was dangerous territory, the kind of technical second-guessing that could lead to disastrous decisions if someone with Alex's level of authority started implementing changes based on incomplete understanding. Alex, Marcus said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, database architecture is probably the most complex aspect of what we do here. You can't just decide that we need to change our data structure because you read an article about NoSQL databases or heard a buzzword at a conference. He moved to another section of the whiteboard, pointing to a complex diagram of their current system. We're using PostgreSQL with carefully optimized indexes, foreign key relationships, and transaction protocols that took me 2 years to design and implement. Switching to a different database model would require rewriting thousands of lines of code and risking data consistency issues that could destroy our business. Alex studied the diagram with interest. This is really impressive work, Marcus. The relationship mapping is particularly elegant. But I'm wondering about horizontal scaling. With PostgreSQL, aren't you limited in terms of how you can distribute write operations across multiple servers? Marcus stared at Alex for a moment. That was actually a sophisticated question, the kind of thing that might be asked by someone with real database experience. But it was also exactly the kind of dangerous half-knowledge that could lead to catastrophic decisions. That's the problem with executives who think they understand technology, Marcus said, his frustration finally boiling over. You pick up a few technical terms, read some blog posts about database scaling, and suddenly you think you can make architectural decisions that affect our entire product. He turned away from the whiteboard and faced Alex directly. Horizontal scaling isn't just about distributing write operations. It's about consistency models, conflict resolution, eventual consistency versus strong consistency, CAP Theorem implications. Marcus was building momentum now, driven by months of accumulated frustration with what he saw as Alex's technical incompetence. You want to know the truth? I've never worked for a CEO who understood technology less than you do, and that's dangerous for a tech company. You're making decisions that affect our technical direction based on management theories and financial models, but you don't understand the fundamental principles of how these systems actually work. Alex remained calm, though something subtle had shifted in his expression. You're right that I ask a lot of questions, and you're right that I approach technology from a business perspective rather than a purely technical one. But I'm curious about something, Marcus. What's that? Marcus asked, still riding the wave of his own righteousness. You mentioned CAP Theorem. Can you explain how it applies to our current database architecture? Marcus blinked. CAP Theorem, the principle that distributed systems can provide at most 2 of 3 guarantees: consistency, availability, and partition tolerance, was advanced computer science theory. Not the kind of thing that usually came up in conversations with non-technical executives. Well, Marcus said, slightly thrown off balance. CAP Theorem it's about the trade-offs you have to make in distributed systems. You can't have perfect consistency, perfect availability, and perfect partition tolerance at the same time. Right, Alex said. And which 2 properties is our current system optimized for? Marcus hesitated. This was getting into territory that required more nuanced understanding than he had expected to need. We prioritize consistency and availability, but that's not really the point. So we're vulnerable to network partitions, Alex said. What happens if our primary database cluster loses connectivity to the backup clusters? We have failover protocols, Marcus began, but he was realizing that Alex's questions were exposing potential weaknesses in their architecture that he hadn't fully considered. But those failover protocols prioritize consistency over availability, right? So if there's a network partition, the system goes into read-only mode rather than risking data inconsistency. Marcus stared at Alex. That was exactly how their failover system worked, and it was a design decision that Marcus had made specifically to prevent data corruption. But it also meant that certain types of network failures could effectively shut down their service. How did Alex know that? Alex, Marcus said slowly, how do you know about our failover protocols? Alex smiled for the first time since entering Marcus's office. I read the documentation. Very thorough work, by the way. The decision to prioritize consistency over availability is smart for a CRM system where data integrity is critical. You read our technical documentation? Marcus asked, confused. All of it? Most of it. I've been trying to understand how our systems work since I started here. I have to admit, your architecture is more sophisticated than I expected for a company this size. Marcus felt like he was experiencing some kind of cognitive dissonance. The CEO, who he had dismissed as technically clueless, was demonstrating knowledge of advanced computer science concepts and specific details of their system architecture. I don't understand, Marcus said. If you know this stuff, why do you ask such basic questions in meetings? Why do you act like you don't understand technology? Alex pulled a chair closer to Marcus's desk and sat down. Because I've learned that if you start a conversation by demonstrating what you know, people tell you what they think you want to hear. But if you start by asking questions and listening carefully, people tell you what they actually think. He gestured toward the whiteboards covered with Marcus's diagrams. For example, if I had walked in here 3 months ago and started discussing database optimization strategies, you would have agreed with whatever I suggested, regardless of whether it was a good idea. But because you thought I didn't understand technology, you've been completely honest about your technical opinions and concerns. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair, trying to process what he was hearing. So you've been pretending to be non-technical? Not pretending, Alex said. Testing. I wanted to understand how our technical team operates, what kinds of problems you're solving, and whether our current systems are as robust as they appear to be. And what have you concluded? Marcus asked. Alex leaned forward. I've concluded that you're an excellent systems administrator with a deep understanding of infrastructure management. Your network design is solid, your security protocols are thorough, and your disaster recovery planning is better than what I've seen at companies 3 times our size. Marcus felt a flush of pride, but it was tempered by confusion. Then why did you seem so skeptical about our database architecture? Because, Alex said, excellent systems administration and optimal database architecture are 2 different things. Your infrastructure is great for our current scale, but some of the design decisions you made 2 years ago are going to become bottlenecks as we grow. He pulled out his tablet again, showing Marcus a detailed analysis that went far beyond what any normal CEO should have been able to produce. You're right that switching database systems would be risky and expensive, but there are incremental changes we could make. Implementing read replicas, optimizing our indexing strategy, introducing a caching layer that would improve performance without requiring a complete architectural overhaul. Marcus studied the analysis, and despite his lingering confusion about Alex's technical knowledge, he had to admit that the suggestions were sophisticated and well-reasoned. Alex, Marcus said finally, I have to ask, what's your actual technical background? Alex was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. I have a PhD in computer science from MIT. I've been programming since I was 12, and I've been involved in developing some of the foundational technologies that modern web applications depend on. Marcus stared at him. Some of the foundational technologies? Data compression algorithms, distributed computing protocols, early social networking platforms. Alex paused. I've been fortunate to work on projects that had significant impact on the industry. Which projects? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect that the answer might be more significant than he was prepared to hear. Alex pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a Wikipedia page. I developed the Chen-Williams compression algorithm that's used in most modern file-sharing systems. I was the lead architect for the distributed computing framework that Amazon uses for AWS. And I founded 3 companies that were acquired by Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. Marcus read the page, his eyes widening as he realized that he was looking at the biography of one of the most influential technologists of the past 2 decades. The man he had been lecturing about database architecture had literally written some of the code that made modern internet infrastructure possible. "You're Alexander Chen-Williams," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am," Alex said. "Though I've been using a simplified version of my name for the past few years to avoid the kind of attention that comes with that reputation." Marcus felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. Everything he thought he knew about the situation had been turned upside down. "You're one of the most famous programmers in the world. You've probably forgotten more about technology than I'll ever know. And I've been lecturing you about basic computer science concepts for 3 months. You've been doing your job," Alex said. "And you've been doing it well. The fact that you were willing to challenge someone you thought was technically incompetent shows exactly the kind of integrity and technical leadership this company needs." "But I was so condescending," Marcus said, his face burning with embarrassment. "I treated you like you were an idiot. You treated me like someone who was making potentially dangerous technical decisions without sufficient knowledge," Alex said. "Which is exactly how you should treat anyone in that situation, regardless of their title." Marcus shook his head, still trying to process the revelation. "I don't understand why you're here. Why would someone with your background and resources take a job as CEO of a mid-sized software company?" Alex leaned back in his chair. "Because I wanted to find out whether it's still possible to build the kind of technology company I fell in love with when I first started programming. Most of the companies I've been involved with eventually became focused more on growth and profit than on solving interesting technical problems." He gestured around the office. "Meridian Solutions has the potential to be different. You have a talented technical team, a product that solves real problems for customers, and a culture that values engineering excellence over marketing hype. But you could start your own company," Marcus said. "You could hire any programmers you wanted, build any product you wanted." "I've done that," Alex said. 7 times. And every time, success brought pressures that eventually compromised the technical vision. Investors who wanted faster growth, customers who demanded features that made the product worse, managers who prioritized short-term profits over long-term innovation. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "I wanted to try a different approach. Instead of starting from scratch, I wanted to find a company that was already doing good work and help it become exceptional without losing what made it special in the first place." Marcus was beginning to understand. "And you couldn't do that if people knew who you really were?" Chucked him. "Exactly. If I had shown up as Alexander Chen-Williams, everyone would have deferred to my opinion, regardless of whether it was right. The technical team would have stopped thinking critically about system design. The sales team would have started making promises based on what they thought I could deliver, rather than what we actually had." Alex turned back to face Marcus. "But by coming here as just another CEO with business credentials, I've been able to observe how the company actually operates. I've learned what's working, what isn't, and what kinds of changes would actually improve things, rather than just satisfying my own technical preferences." "And what have you learned?" Marcus asked. "I've learned that you have excellent technical instincts, but limited exposure to some of the newer approaches to scaling distributed systems. I've learned that our development team is creative and skilled, but hasn't had the resources to explore some advanced technologies that could give us significant competitive advantages. And I've learned that our current trajectory is sustainable, but not optimal." Alex sat back down across from Marcus. "I've also learned that you're exactly the kind of technical leader I've been looking for, someone who cares more about building robust systems than impressing people with buzzwords, someone who's willing to challenge authority when technical principles are at stake, and someone who has the integrity to admit when they don't know something." Marcus felt a mixture of pride and confusion. "I still don't understand why you're telling me this," If your strategy was to stay undercover, why reveal your identity now? Because, Alex said, I think it's time to move to the next phase of the experiment. I've learned what I needed to learn about how this company operates. Now I want to find out what it's capable of becoming. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase and handed it to Marcus. I'd like you to review these technical specifications and tell me what you think. Marcus opened the folder and found detailed plans for a complete overhaul of their technical infrastructure. Not just incremental improvements, but a fundamental reimagining of their system architecture, using cutting-edge technologies that he had only read about in research papers. This is... Marcus paused, trying to process the scope and sophistication of what he was looking at. This is like nothing I've ever seen. These approaches to distributed computing, these machine learning integration strategies, this is years ahead of what anyone else in our industry is doing. It's also completely achievable with our current team and budget, Alex said, if we're smart about how we implement it. Marcus continued reading, his excitement growing as he realized the implications of what Alex was proposing. This would make us the most technically advanced CRM platform in the market. Our competitors wouldn't be able to match this kind of performance and scalability. That's the idea, Alex said. But I need a technical leader who can help me implement this vision without losing the engineering culture that makes this company special. Marcus looked up from the documents. You're offering me a promotion? I'm offering you the chance to build something extraordinary, Alex said. As Chief Technology Officer, working directly with me to implement these systems and lead the technical team through the most ambitious project of their careers. Marcus set down the folder, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was being offered. Alex, I don't know if I'm qualified for this. You're talking about technologies and approaches that are way beyond my current experience level. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been qualified either, Alex said. But I've spent the past decade learning these technologies, and I'm willing to teach them to someone who has the foundational knowledge and the right mindset. He leaned forward. Marcus, the most important qualification for this job isn't what you already know. It's your willingness to learn, your commitment to engineering excellence, and your ability to challenge ideas when they don't make technical sense. You've demonstrated all of those qualities, even when you thought you were challenging someone who could fire you. Marcus thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 months, recontextualizing every conversation and interaction through the lens of what he now knew about Alex's real identity and intentions. You've been testing me this entire time, he said. I've been observing you, Alex corrected. Testing implies that there were right and wrong answers, but what I was really looking for was integrity, curiosity, and the kind of technical judgment that can't be taught. Marcus stood up and walked to his whiteboard, looking at the diagrams he had drawn to explain concepts to someone he had assumed knew nothing about technology. The irony was overwhelming. I lectured one of the most accomplished technologists in the world about database fundamentals, he said, shaking his head. And you did it clearly, accurately, and with genuine concern for the company's technical welfare, Alex said. That tells me everything I need to know about how you'll approach the challenges we're going to face. Marcus turned back to face Alex. If I accept this position, what happens to the rest of the IT team? They get the opportunity to work on the most advanced technical project of their careers, with resources and support they've never had before, Alex said. And they get to do it under the leadership of someone they already trust and respect. And what happens when the industry finds out that Alexander Chen-Williams is the CEO of Meridian Solutions? Alex smiled. That depends on how successfully we execute this technical vision. If we build what I think we can build, the attention will be focused on our innovations rather than my involvement. Marcus looked at the folder of technical specifications again, feeling the pull of intellectual excitement that he hadn't experienced since his early days as a programmer. This was the kind of project that technologists dreamed of, the chance to build something genuinely groundbreaking with unlimited resources and the guidance of someone who had already proven that such ambitions were achievable. Alex, Marcus said finally, I have one more question. What's that? How long have you been planning this? The technical specifications? About 6 months. The decision to find someone like you to help implement them? About 3 months? The realization that you were the right person for the job? About 6 weeks ago, when you spent an entire afternoon explaining to me why a seemingly simple feature request would require fundamental changes to our data model. Marcus remembered that conversation. He had been frustrated by what he perceived as Alex's failure to understand the technical implications of the sales team's feature requests. Now he realized that Alex had been testing his ability to explain complex technical concepts and defend principled engineering decisions. "You've been incredibly patient," Marcus said. "I've been incredibly fortunate," Alex replied. "Finding someone with the right combination of technical knowledge, leadership potential, and integrity is much more difficult than finding someone with just technical knowledge." Marcus made his decision. "I accept." Alex stood up and extended his hand. "Welcome to the most interesting challenge of your career." As they shook hands, Marcus realized that his entire understanding of his professional life had been transformed in the space of a single conversation. The CEO he had dismissed as technically incompetent was actually one of his heroes. The job he had been doing competently was about to become the most ambitious project he could imagine, and the career he had thought was reaching its plateau was about to launch into territory he had never dreamed possible. "One more thing," Marcus said as Alex prepared to leave his office. "What's that?" "Next time you want to test someone's technical knowledge and integrity, maybe start with that information up front. It would save everyone a lot of embarrassment." Alex laughed. "But then I wouldn't learn nearly as much about how they handle challenging situations." As Alex left the IT department and returned to his executive office, Marcus sat back down at his desk and looked at the technical specifications that would define the next phase of his career. He thought about all the times he had criticized Alex's technical competence, all the lectures he had delivered about concepts that Alex understood better than he did, and all the opportunities he had missed to learn from someone whose knowledge and experience far exceeded his own. But he also realized that his willingness to challenge authority, defend technical principles, and maintain engineering integrity had been exactly what Alex was looking for. His mistakes had actually been demonstrations of the qualities that made him qualified for the position he was being offered. 6 months later, when Meridian Solutions announced the most advanced customer relationship management platform in the industry, powered by distributed computing technologies that competitors couldn't match, the technology press would focus on the innovations rather than the personalities behind them. Marcus, now serving as Chief Technology Officer, would give interviews about the engineering challenges they had overcome and the technical decisions that had made their breakthroughs possible. Alex, still maintaining a relatively low profile, would speak about corporate culture and the importance of empowering technical teams to pursue ambitious projects. But the real story would remain largely untold. How one of the most accomplished technologists of his generation had gone undercover to find and develop the kind of technical leadership that the industry desperately needed, and how an IT manager's willingness to challenge authority had led to the most important opportunity of his career. The lesson wasn't just about the danger of making assumptions about people's capabilities based on their apparent role or knowledge level. It was about the value of maintaining professional integrity regardless of the political consequences, the importance of defending technical principles even when it seems risky, and the possibility that the person asking basic questions might actually be testing your expertise rather than revealing their ignorance. In the fast-moving world of technology, where innovation depends on the willingness to challenge conventional wisdom and explore new possibilities, the most valuable leaders are often the ones who ask the right questions, rather than providing easy answers. And sometimes, the greatest opportunities come disguised as frustrating conversations with people who seem to understand less than they actually do. If this story resonates with you, remember, never dismiss someone's intelligence based on the questions they ask. The person who seems to need basic explanations might actually be evaluating your ability to communicate complex concepts clearly and defend important principles under pressure. Challenge assumptions respectfully, maintain your professional integrity regardless of who you're talking to, and remember that the most accomplished experts are often the ones who ask the most thoughtful questions. Because you never know when the person testing your knowledge might be someone whose expertise far exceeds your own, and whose respect could transform your entire career.